and where we are going generally. This is very much a non-quantum chemical talk. It's very unusual, I believe, in modern standards. We are trying to establish a new direction of research. Well, maybe we'll be successful, maybe not, but we have a lot of fun doing that. So I would like to tell you today about what we actually do. The story started maybe some 10 years ago when my longtime friend Stefan Irle, that time at Nagoya University, now in Oak National Laboratory, approached me and said that he did interesting calculations for graphene nanoflakes. He said he optimized the geometries of these molecules with DFT, and what he discovered is that they behave like water rings, like this picture here. In the middle, the rings are short, then are longer, then are short and longer, and so on. And if you go to larger flake, they're opposite. They're shorter in the middle, longer, and so on. He said he doesn't understand this because DFT only gives him the structures. And he believes that that has something to do with the aromaticity of the system. So if I can explain this to him, he would be very happy. I started looking into that. I knew nothing about aromaticity at that time. And to be honest, I was not very much interested. I was a typical quantum chemist, and the words like aromaticity sounded a bit cheesy, at least. And I started learning. So turned out to be a very interesting project. Let me tell you something about this. I start from very beginning. We all know that for benzene, you have 2 Kekule structures. So the number of Kekule structures is 2. For naphthalene, next molecule, the number of Kekule structure is 3. And if you go to some larger system, for example, to this one, the number of Kekule structure is 6. I guess it takes some 5 minutes with paper and pencil to find it out. If you go to even larger structure, to coronene, the number is 20, and believe me, it takes maybe 10 minutes to construct them, but then it takes another 1 hour and 50 minutes to make sure that you didn't make any mistake. So I started looking for a software for finding these structures and for finding actually the number of Kekule structures in benzenoids. And I found that, there is no such software really. You cannot generate the set of Kekule structures easily because this problem is quite hard. So we started looking into that in detail, and we discovered that what we need are not Kekule structures. Let me explain that to you on example. Before that, if I ask you what is the number of Kekule structure for this monstrous benzenoid, you would probably shake your arms saying we don't know, and I don't know either. I don't know even how to find it at that moment. But as I said, we don't really need Kekule structures to answer the question posed by Stefan. We need something more than Kekule structure. We need the aromaticity concept. And that comes usually in organic chemistry as a linear combination of 2 Kekule structures. What it means for us, quantum chemists, the story is easy. If you construct Kekule structures, you have pi orbitals that are the localized pi orbitals between 2 neighboring carbon atoms. You can make 3 pairs like that or 3 pairs like that and occupy each of them by 2 electrons, getting 3 pi bonds. So constructing a determinant or configuration state function corresponding to Kekule structure is very easy. How to construct a determinant corresponding to the Clar structure? Well, similar story. You have to combine 6 carbon atoms, the pi orbitals, to obtain either the fully bonding pi orbital or 2 degenerate half pi bonding orbitals. So we know what it means to construct these things from a quantum chemical viewpoint. Now, how we can find the number of these structures for larger molecules. So if you go to pyrene, the molecule I studied before, turns out there are 6 Kekule structures, but you have 6 additional structures with single ring and 1 additional structures with 2 rings. If you go to larger stuff, for coronene, turns out that here, the richness is much larger. You have 69 total number of Clar covers. We will call these generalized Kekule structures as Clar covers. You have 69 of them. The maximal number of rings that you can put inside is 3. So now the problem of generating Kekule structure, which was hard by itself, became even more complicated because you have to think about the distributing aromatic rings in these structures. how to approach this problem, how to find what is the number of Clar covers for this monster, as I said before. We started looking into that problem, and first thing we found was a paper written by Ivan Gutman, among others, the main editor of the journal Match, Communications in Mathematical and Computer Chemistry. At that time, I never heard about this journal, even if I should. But then I started looking inside, and I found a lot of interesting papers inside. And this wonderful paper explained what is the algorithm for calculation of Kekule and Clar numbers for these large things. So after reading, okay, one more thing. In this paper, they also said how to keep track of these things, how to do accounting. When I go back to the previous structure, you see there are so many, 69 different Clar covers, and they are of different types. So how to do accounting of these things, not to lose track that you are actually doing these things correctly. So that was found also in this paper, and that was called Zhang-Zhang polynomial. The story is extremely easy. As you see here, you have in the green box, you have 6 Clar covers with no aromatic rings, 6 Clar covers with 1 aromatic ring, and 1 Clar cover with 2 aromatic rings. So what we do, we form a polynomial, and this polynomial exactly represents these numbers of different types of Clar covers. Now there is a variable x, but it has no meaning. The only meaning of this variable x is which power stands next to x. If the power is 2, it means we have 2 aromatic rings. If power is 1, means there is 1 aromatic ring. And if the power is 0, which means effectively 1, that means we have Kekule structures. So that's a way of accounting for these Clar covers that we are looking for, that we want to use later, as I will show later, for actually doing chemistry. So Zhang-Zhang polynomials, or I will say briefly ZZ polynomial, for that particular structure is 6 plus 6x plus 1x squared. For coronene, it is already more complicated, 20 plus 32x plus 15x squared plus 2x to the power 3. Some of them would say, why to bother with ZZ polynomial? Why not to simply store a vector of these numbers? Yeah, that would be effectively the same, but however, it turns out that calculating these polynomials is easier because of a nice recursive properties, this polynomial object. So that was defined some 25 years ago by 2 Chinese mathematicians, both of them with the name Zhang. That's why the name of the polynomial. And how you really find this polynomial? It's very easy. You choose a bond in this structure, and you assign to this bond either a single character or double character or aromatic character. By doing that, you assign not only this bond, but also a vicinity of that bond. It's decided by choosing that particular condition. So as you see, by doing that, we get a graph, and we get a branching of this graph into 3 subgraphs, and each of these graphs is smaller. By now selecting a bond in each of these 3 subgraphs, we have next branching, and finally, we can go to the leaves of that graph, and counting the leaves of that graph, we can get the ZZ polynomial. Very easy thing. And easy algorithm to determine it. This is an iterative algorithm. So all the program that we have is written in 6 lines, except for this recursive procedure that is algorithmically specified here. So we coded that thing. And first time we made it a service in web service that we can do that. And this web service was very nice. Actually, for this talk, I revived this web service. So if you let me change now, you can access it if you want at this particular address. So now I will connect with my screen to that particular thing. So new share, and that would be this, I guess. Right, I hope you can see now a new thing. And now in this window, I have a graphical builder. I click on the graphical builder, and now I use my mouse to build my molecule. For example, I choose a benzenoid like that. After doing that, I click compute, and that appears here as ZZ polynomial. As you see, the calculation was instantaneous. If you go to something larger, for example, this, I don't know how efficient that machine on which it's standing is, so let me do a bit smaller. It computed it also instantaneously. Okay, I return back to the original okay, so we have this web service with which you can calculate this Zhang-Zhang polynomial, and as you see, the calculation is very fast. So what we can do with this? Let me tell you about this calculator. It is written in Fortran 95. You can easily calculate structure to 10,000 atoms if they are kind of long. If they are bulky, then we had a limit of 500. Calculation for 500 can take long. I will speak about that a bit later. We have to invent a new classes of integers to do it, because it turns out that the coefficient in Zhang-Zhang polynomials could be really large. You also have a way of downloading these things if you go to my abstract of my talk, you will find these paths for downloading. Good. So how many Clar covers we have here? Well, again, I can go to the Zhang-Zhang polynomial. My computer got a bit crazy from. Okay, I stop sharing for a moment and open the window again and start sharing again. I'm coming back to this ZZ polynomial, and now I draw this structure. But this time I'm not using web service. I'm using a computer program that I have on my computer. It's called ZZDecomposer. And this ZZDecomposer, I can create this structure 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It's a bit hard to create exactly the same. 2, 4, 3, 5, and 5, and 4. If I didn't make any mistake, we have the same thing. Now I go to the window called ZZ Polynomial Calculator here, and I do start the calculation. And what I get, the answer is 0. This structure is non-Kekulean. There is not even one Kekule structure that I can form for this. How would you know that without that program? Here you have, I ran this program already many times today. I found ZZ polynomial for other stuff. Calculations are very instantaneous for this thing. Okay, let me come back to the new share, to the talk. Okay. We can calculate ZZ polynomials for large structures. The calculation for small hexagons, for large hexagons. As you see, this is becoming very large. At that time, it was our limit to do the calculations. Now, we actually can do much larger calculations thanks to Rafał Poteszwa, who joined our effort, our team, recently. And now, thanks to him, we can do calculation for that benzenoid within minutes. And if you do the calculation, turns out that the number of Kekule structure here is huge. It's 10 to the power 64. The total number of Clar covers you can make for this thing is even larger. It's 10 to the power 83. That takes about 2-3 minutes to do the calculations for this particular structure. So we are going to limits of number of structures, number of basis functions that were never even approached before. So that particular thing is huge. If you look at the ZZ polynomial, it's even larger. I just tried to fit it in one page, so I had to make the font very small. You see nothing, but that was the point. We just stop here only for a short moment. Let's go further. I'm more these days a mathematician rather than a chemist, so I'm inclined to find interesting mathematical problems in the theory of the ZZ polynomials. One of them is finding asymptotic solutions. So if you take a series of polynomials like that, I want to find that the results are independent of M. So at the end of the day, I find a formula that is representing all of these formulas. This is a very simple one, 1 plus m times 1 plus x. But for other families, it's quite complicated. For that family, that formula was available before, but we found out that if you use not variable x, but 1 plus x, then the formula is much nicer. It's simply a hypergeometric function 2f1. And if you go even to more complicated structures like this one, multiple zigzag chains, a rectangle of hexagons, we cannot really find immediately the ZZ polynomials. We find the generating function in form of the continued fractions. And if you expand these continuous fractions, the ZZ polynomial formula comes in this form with the coefficients d given by that wonderful and terrible at the same time equation. But enough about mathematics. Let's now talk about chemistry. Before that, I just say that there are a few mathematical problems that are to be solved here in this theory. If somebody is interested, welcome. Wonderful problems. Solve hexagons, which I talked about. Solve this structure. We call them oblate rectangles. Nobody knows what the ZZ polynomials of them are. And a few other things. This talk will be recorded. You can come here later and look at this. Now, let's go to chemistry. We want to use these structures for doing chemical stuff. One of them would be aromaticity, the problem that bothered Stefan a long time ago. How to calculate aromaticity of flakes? Very easily. Look at all Clar covers. And now some of them are non-aromatic. Some of them are aromatic. So if we choose, for example, that particular ring, I find that here is non-aromatic, non-aromatic, aromatic, 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 and all the rest is non-aromatic. So in 3 out of 13, this is aromatic. If you look at that particular ring, only in 1 out of 13 structure it's aromatic, in this one. So we can find aromaticity simply by taking the ratio of these rings versus non-rings, or total number of structures. How to find aromaticity here? I don't have time, but if you take the ZZDecomposer, you can click the button called Aromaticity Calculator, and within seconds you will see the aromaticity distribution in this molecule. Good. Turns out that if you do the calculation for the flake that Stefan gave us, you found a very funny patterns of aromaticity. They are very different. First of all, you see the islands. So large aromaticity, small aromaticity, large, small, and so on. This is very similar with the DFT calculation, with the nuclear independent chemical shift. And as you see, these calculations are taking hours or days. Our calculations can be done now within seconds. If you go to larger flakes or the larger family, exactly the same patterns you get. Again, exactly what he noticed in the structure, in the optimized DFT structure. We are confirming them with the aromaticity patterns. What else except aromaticity you can do? You can find where the radical is created in a molecule. Take a molecule. Now I have to change again. So let me go to ZZDecomposer again, where it was. ZZDecomposer. Did I close it? Show all windows. Here it is. No, here is the other one. Well, anyway, probably I don't have time. There are many applications. So let me go back to sharing the screen, this one, and let's just go with the talk. Sorry for not enough time for everything. You can find where this radical is created. There is another button in the ZZDecomposer where it simply gives you the location of the radical. So for example, if you do the ZZ population, our population, here on the right, for these two structures, that's what you get. Large circle means unpaired electron. Small circles means small probability of finding unpaired electrons. Now we compare these with the Levdin population analysis or Mulliken population analysis, and you see that these three are virtually identical. There is no difference, except that for these two, you have to do heavy quantum chemical calculations, get orbitals. Here, nothing. You just compute ZZ polynomial and you divide one thing by another thing. Let's go further. Here I have distribution of the biradical ZZ population in Kekule and Benzenoids. If you look at these structures, you find that if I don't want to have all electrons paired and two of them unpaired, the spin up and spin down, they don't like to be next to each other. They like to be on the opposite side of the flake. On the other thing, you see that they kind of make a wave, larger, smaller, on the opposite side. If you make the structure more complicated, there is one wave here, another wave here, another wave here, another wave here. This is quite interesting results that we are getting simply by computing strange mathematical objects like ZZ polynomials. Let's go further. You can model chemical reactions. You take, for example, oxygen molecule, and you put this oxygen molecule on the top of a flake. This oxygen molecule dissociates into two oxygen atoms, and now the question is where the atoms go. Do they want to be next to each other on the edge of the flake, or maybe they prefer to be far away from each other in the middle of the flake? And you can do calculations with this. And you can actually find that these oxygen molecules prefer to stay at the edge of the flake and as close as possible to each other. In that way, you are destroying least number of Clar structures. How this correlates with quantum chemical methods? Here is the paper from 2013 with late Professor Morokuma that we did calculation of this Kekule structure surviving the oxidation, and we correlated with the energy from the quantum chemical calculation. I don't remember, maybe it was DFT energy. And we found quite nice correlation. What you can find within seconds by our ZZ polynomials takes quite long time, well, for DFTB not so long, from the quantum theory. Let's go further. There is not many papers on the topic. That's a complete literature, maybe 50 papers, very little. Our group contributed around 25 to that. There is a lot of perspectives. What we are planning to do, I don't have time to really interpret these results in the quantum chemical language, but there is a deep interpretation, and we are planning to write with Rafał Poteszwa soon a wire paper on this and perspective paper on these things. You can actually introduce geometry optimization. You will have CI wave function associated with this Clar cover basis. You can go to harmonic frequencies, excited state calculation, spectra. All this is possible. How good they were, I have no idea. That must be tried. Conclusions. We have completely new way of thinking about these carbon nanomaterials. I wouldn't say really new because Kekule structures, Clar covers were really popular 30 years ago. By now, they really sank into oblivion. So we are kind of reviving old ideas, but doing it very differently and with new modern technologies and maybe the platform that the conference is devoted to, we will be able to make a nice, robust programs that are doing that. A lot of people were involved in this. Everything started with Chen-Pin Cho, that joined as a PhD student in my laboratory. And he designed programs. First, this online calculator that I gave you, then the ZZDecomposer that you can download from the homepages that are in the abstract. Wonderful. He developed a lot working on this, not only scientifically, but also, as you see from the photo. Other people are Xianqi Chen. He was a master student in my laboratory. He joined and developed this radical calculator in the ZZDecomposer, and he wrote a master thesis of 300 pages long, full of results, still not published, waiting for good timing. Now coronavirus is good timing. And Johanna Langner, she's a beautiful mind in my laboratory, and mathematically oriented, wonderful brain. And the number of results she produced, her main topic is very different. It's helium wave function, but from that, you don't have many papers. So I asked her to do a few papers in this theory, and she developed so many different things: connectivity graphs, algorithms for calculations, equivalence between other polynomials, tiling polynomials. Recently, last year, she developed interface theory of benzenoids. She just conceived it by herself. Wonderful work, wonderful work. And recently we published a paper on arXiv so far and submitted to Australian Journal of Combinatorics about correspondence between this polynomial and another strict order polynomials in combinatorics. So Johanna is going to graduate this year. She will be on the market. If you are looking for a wonderful postdoc, or even better, for a wonderful young faculty in your department, consider her. Another person that was involved in work is Grzegorz Moś, as you see, avid water polo player, champion of Poland from last year, and because of COVID, probably staying like that for next few years, because no competition this year. And personally, my nephew, but that's not the reason why I talk about him. A few years ago in vacation, he seen me scribbling something. He came asking what I'm doing. I explained to him. 2 days later, he came to me with a solution to that. And after the vacation, we wrote a paper of that, as you see, September 29. And as you see, his affiliation, Department of Mathematics, he decided to study mathematics because of that. And after that, we have two other papers together. And now this year, he started PhD course in mathematics. First special thanks go to Rafał Podeszwa, here trying with me to embrace a baobab in South Africa. When he seen a paper that we published quite recently, just 2 months ago, about ZZ polynomials of fullerenes, he was very much interested by the following fact. All these isomers of fullerenes have distinct ZZ polynomials. Simply, you can calculate ZZ polynomials for them within seconds, and you know which isomer you have. But he wanted to check if the distinct polynomials go to larger things, and turns out that not necessarily. Because the computational time for these larger things is so much larger. And what Rafał did, he programmed a new way of computing these polynomials. With his method, we can go to really large systems, and within seconds. Finally, I would like to give my special acknowledgement to Kim Kwon-sok. That is my favorite Korean composer and singer. And this song, Around 30, is something that went with me through my life all the time. Even if my wife says, around 30 is not for you, you should listen to the song Around 50. Thank you very much.
So thank you for your interesting talk, and session for questions and answers is open. I see that Professor Felix Placer wants to ask a question.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks for this talk. I think it looks very impressive. I was just wondering, let's say the more pedestrian way to look at these things is kind of with the bipartite graphene lattice. And for example, you need, I mean, you can't have a Kekule structure if you don't have, you know, the same number of atoms from one lattice and the other lattice. So I just wondered how, if these types of thoughts play into what you're doing at all, or if it's separate.
So as you said, for Kekule structures, for the structure to be Kekulean, the number of these blue, white and black vertices must be the same. However, when it's not the same, when you have odd one, then you have radicals. I covered that in my talk. Okay. When you have one of these dots, for example, white one, larger by 2 than the black ones, then you again have biradicals, but these biradicals would have exactly the same color. In my biradicals were red and blue. Those that you are talking about would be all blue. There will be 2 unpaired spins of the same sign. Yes, and ZZDecomposer covers this situation. Then
okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, just.
Okay, more questions? Any
questions?
questions?
Yes, I do have one.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for the talk. You already kind of answered my question when discussing the radicals. I just wanted to confirm, how can you deal with heteroatom? And is there well-established theory for that?
I have no idea. No, nothing. So if you put one sulfur there, one oxygen, I don't know. Yes, that theory doesn't know about what these atoms really are. There are graphs for that theory. Can you generalize it for that? That would be interesting. We never tried. That could be difficult, challenging, but maybe interesting. But I'm afraid that for that we need to have quantum chemistry.
Okay, thank you.